Hello everybody. This is the first stream I've done in a while, so it's great to finally be back doing the stream. Let's see if there's anyone here yet. Okay, we got some folks watching. Yay! So thanks for joining us. Want to apologize first to any of my longtime viewers for not streaming and forever uploading any videos. As I said in my hiatus video, it's been crazy. I hope that this is the start of me coming back in more regular fashion, but we shall see. But let's get right into it. The French election is tomorrow, and I did a couple videos in the last year or 2 years on this topic. Somewhat out of date now, admittedly, but there's still a lot in there. So if you haven't watched those, go watch them now, and we'll talk about just the situation that France is in now. The election is tomorrow. Things are getting down to the wire. It is going to be an interesting race that we're going to see tomorrow. And for the most part, people predict it's going to be the exact same repeat of what happened in 2017 come the second round. It is... That's actually just a lighting thingy, pluribus. I don't actually have a unibrow. But it is going to be an interesting race tomorrow. So let's just talk first about who the candidates are. So let me get to the right page I had open here. Here we are. Yeah. And maybe it does need a little bit of a trim there, but... Can you guys hear me now? I heard my audio cut out there, so let's see. I may have to copy something here, because this is a new computer I'm doing this on, so let me paste. Let's see. Okay. Is it inputting my new audio thing? But anyway, I was talking about Nathalie Arthaud. She's of the Workers' Struggle Party, an Orthodox Trotskyist, quote-unquote, Revolutionary Communist Party. They are likely to get about 0.5% of the vote, and this is their third run as well. And she's already gotten... Okay, so you guys should be able to hear me now. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my stream issue. Let's see. Is this working? Let's try this now. So, can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me? Let's see. Microphone. Check. Okay, you guys should be able to hear me now. Yeah, okay, I'm just trying to see what is going on with this, but let's get back to Nathalie Arthaud. She's only going to get about 0.5% of the vote. She did surprisingly get on the ballot very early, though, so that's all there really is to say about her. The next candidate, also at the very bottom tier, is Philippe Poutou of the New Anti-Capitalist Party. This is a fairly newer party, founded in 2012. Grew out of a Trotskyist formation, and this is also his third run at the presidency. He ran in 2012 and 2017 as well. He's a trade unionist and former plant worker. Now he's a municipal elected official, and he is likely to get about 0.5% of the vote as well. And his policies are less orthodox than Artaud's. His party is very much of a Trotskyist inspiration as well, but it's more open to social movements. That's the big thing about Artaud's Worker Struggle Party. They very much eschew social movements like ultra-globalization, the environmental movement, and things like that. They're very big on, organize the workers on the workshop floor. Poutu's party is more open to ultra-globalization, environmentalism, and multiculturalism than Artaud's party. So that's the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the candidates. They're both at the left. You usually have a few others, but then there's a couple other candidates here. This guy, Jean Lassalle, who is probably best known for being described by John Oliver as trying to win the game show So You Think You Can France. And he is basically a self-appointed representative of rural interests in French politics. He is this is his second run. He ran also in, his second run at the presidency, and he is a centrist, Eurosceptic, and agrarian candidate, likely only to get a couple percent of the vote. Very, very minor candidate. And that kind of closed. Oh, yes, there's also Nicolas Dupont-Agen, I think is how you say his name. Most people just call him NDA. He is also kind of in your lower tier of candidates. He leads a party called Debout de France, or I believe that's Arise, France Arise. He's a conservative, quasi-Eurosceptic candidate who's kind of positioned between the Republicans, which is France's main center-right party, and Le Pen. In fact, he ran in 2012 and 2017, and in the second round of 2017, he endorsed Le Pen. And he's moved fairly firmly to the right since that race as well. But he's Eurosceptic, and conservative. That's all there really is to him. He pops up every 5 years for these elections, and then no one ever really seems to care about him in between. So that's your lower tier of That's your lower tier off the bat. Now for candidates who are usually in an upper tier, but surprisingly are in a lower tier this one, we have Anne Hidalgo of the Socialist Party, the PS. And the PS, as I described in my videos on the French elections in the past, they were historically the dominant force of the French left. They were the main center-left party in France. They were decimated in 2017 thanks to the incredibly unpopular leadership of François Hollande from the Socialist Party when he was president. And so they have suffered split. Lots of their supporters have gone to support La France Insoumise or the Ecologists, and they've had multiple factions split off from them, and it's left them with just a rump faction of center-left social democrats. Their right wing went to support Macron, their left wing went to support Mélenchon or the Greens. So this is all they've got left, and she's only pulling around 2%, which is set to make it the worst result for the Socialist Party in French history. So that is a very surprising development here. Someone commenting on Lassalle, how he's both a centrist and Eurosceptic. Well, his whole thing is he represents rural interests, so I can kind of see where that comes in there. Moving on now, we're still in the lower tier. We come to Fabien Roussel. Now, this is a re-entry into French elections. He represents the Communist Party of France. He's the leader of the Communist Party, and they have not run a candidate in the last two presidential elections. This is going to mark their first presidential candidate on their own since, I believe it was 2007, and they usually don't do all that well in presidential elections. But previously they had backed Mélenchon in 2012 and 2017, but they broke with Mélenchon, and now they're kind of going in this new direction, led by Roussel. And Roussel is pursuing a bit more of an orthodox line. He's not quite an orthodox Marxist-Leninist, but it's more of an orthodox French communist line, and it's a bit more old left and conservative on security issues and immigration and even the environment. He has professed a strong belief in the benefits of steak and wine as opposed to quinoa, and that's very much a dig at Mélenchon in particular, who is a vegan, as well as to Jadot of the Ecologists, who is a big advocate for reducing meat consumption. And he's also advocating more police officers in working class communities to combat crime. and antisocial behavior, and this very much is at odds with the overall trend of the left, not just in France, but globally, which is very much saying we need to just decriminalize to make life better, not to increase police funding. We need to defund police, and we need to give less powers to police and address social issues that are the cause of crime. He's taking somewhat the opposite line, so he's kind of positioning himself as a law and order leftist. He's also the only left-wing candidate that supports nuclear energy. All the other leftists are anti-nuclear. So that's quite unique, but his main goal here isn't to actually win. It's to reestablish the Communist Party as a independent force of French politics apart from Mélenchon, because he has been the candidate they've backed in the last 2 elections. And now we can come to a guy who was previously thought to be doing quite well. We thought he was going to do well. He's done a lot worse than we thought. Yannick Jadot of the Europe Ecologie Les Verts, EELV, which is the main ecologist party. He's also being backed by a couple other parties that are in what's called the ecologist poll, like Generations and Generation Ecology, which are 2 separate parties. But he's being backed by them. I talked about him in my last video on the French elections. He is seen as someone as a moderate within the EELV, yet he's also kind of their biggest player. He was their candidate in 2017, but he dropped out to support Benoit Hamon, the candidate of the Socialist Party, who did not do very well in the end, and Hamon, of course, later broke off from the PS to form Generations, which is backing Jadot. But Jadot's biggest thing is ecological issues, as you'd expect. He started his career in Greenpeace, after all, and so he's big on combating climate change, reducing dependence on fossil fuels and nuclear energy, animal rights. He, unlike Mélenchon, who is a vegan, he is not, but he eats very little meat, he has said, and talked about it in a bit more of an interesting way, and I will confess here, I'm not a vegan myself. I do eat meat, but, sorry about that. That was a weather alert. Yeah, but he was expected to do quite well because the Greens, the ecologists, did very well in the European elections and the municipal elections quite recently, yet his polling numbers have plummeted since the start of this. They thought he was have a chance to lead the left going into this. He very much has not. He's also very pro-European. He wants to create a European army to replace NATO, and he supports European federalism. So that is kind of your mid-tier, I'd say. Now let's get into kind of your upper-tier candidates. So let's start with those who are not quite in the top tier, but are getting close. So first you have Valérie Pécresse, I hope I'm saying that name right, of the Republicans. She is which is the main center-right party. She is as you'd expect, conservative, neoliberal. She wants to be a French Thatcher, basically. That's her whole shtick. There's not really much more to say about her. I am not a big fan of her, obviously. She's a big advocate for getting rid of the shortened work week that France has, reducing the rights of trade unions, and cutting the welfare state. That's her whole shtick. The only thing where she has any overlap with a candidate like Mélenchon is on trade deals, ironically enough, where she's not as big on neoliberal free trade, but she's big on everything else in neoliberalism. She wants to be a French Thatcher. She's politically positioned between Macron and Le Pen, and that's all there really is to say on that. She was doing quite well in the polls, I will say. She was earlier one of the main challengers to Macron, but she's since dropped down significantly in the polls, and it's really hurt her, and a lot of people who were previously supporting her have gone over to supporting Macron anyways, so she is not doing well. And this really hurts the Republicans, because Macron has increasingly come to dominate the right-wing, or the center-right electorate, I should say, within French politics, because he ran as a centrist, but he's governed to the right. So he has very much taken most of the Republicans' traditional electorate away from them, and they have so far failed to get it back. And so that's a big problem for them going into this election. Moving on now to another candidate who was a bit of a surprise, a wild card in the race, and it's this guy, Eric Zemmour, of Reconquête. I think I'm probably saying that wrong. I believe it means Reconquest, but again, do not at me. And he is the worst. Just the worst on here. He is he is a virulent racist. He's a big believer in the Great Replacement theory. He is to the right of Le Pen. He's a self-described Gaullist and Bonapartist, which, for those not versed in French politics, that basically means he supports most of the existing structures in France, but he's also big on preserving them from outside influences, which means Muslims and scary brown people, because, again, this guy is a racist. That's, like, he is a, yeah, like, he is the oddest candidate in this race, because he came out of nowhere, and was for a brief period actually expected to overtake Le Pen. But he has since dropped down significantly in the polls almost immediately after he jumped in the race, and for a period, it almost looked like he wouldn't even get on the ballot because he was having trouble gaining enough nominations. In the end, he did get on the ballot, unfortunately, and it's hurt, and he's not done as well as he thought he would, but he has struck a chord with a segment of the French right wing, and you've seen several major French right-wing politicians in the National Assembly and in the European Parliament primarily leave Le Pen's National Rally, formerly the National Front. But also you've had folks from center-right parties and even Macron's party come over to join him, which that's kind of scary. He wants, big on economic liberalism as well. He's right-wing on economics and, deregulation, cut taxes, cut the welfare state, but also get rid of the immigrants. That's his whole thing. He's also the only candidate, not even Le Pen has endorsed this position, who says that France shouldn't accept Ukrainian refugees. So that has definitely hurt him in the polls as well. Now let's move up to the top tier. And there are 3 candidates here. First one, of course, is my man, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And if you couldn't, for the eagle-eyed viewers among you, you probably would have noticed I am wearing a La France Insoumise pin, and actually have the La France Insoumise flag behind me, as well as another party they're allied with, Picardie Debout. But Mélenchon, he's a left-wing populist, democratic socialist, eco-socialist, and he is a self-described Republican socialist and historical materialist, who very much identifies with Jean Jaurès, the father of French socialism. This is his 3rd run as the presidency as well. He is the leader of La France Insoumise, and formerly the leader of the Parti de Gauche, which he founded after he broke from the Socialist Party. I talked extensively about him in my second French election video, actually also in my first French election video, I should note. But he is very much in a strong position now, as he is in terms of leadership for the left. And he is, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, but his main policy is a 6th republic. He wants to destroy the current French political constitution, the current political order, and replace it with a 6th republic, which would, among other things, reduce the powers of the presidency significantly. He condemns the French presidency as being a presidential monarchy. It would create a proportional representation system for the National Assembly, possibly do away with the French Senate, and it would enshrine things like workers' rights, social rights, and environmental protections into the Constitution as well. Now, he's also quite Eurosceptic. He is not a hard Eurosceptic who wants to get out of the EU right away, but he has called for a Plan A on the EU, which is renegotiating EU treaties, and if that fails, then he is willing to pursue Plan B of calling a referendum on French membership in the European Union. But his biggest thing is supporting the French welfare state, supporting French workers' rights, and opposing neoliberalism, and establishing a 6th republic. That is his main goal. Like, he basically wants to be president to end his own presidency. Which is quite admirable, in my view. And of course, I have endorsed him, and he is by far the strongest candidate of the French left, just as he was in 2017. And so, he has a bit of a shot, but not a great one. Now we get on to the daughter of the man known as the Demon of the Republic, Marine Le Pen of the National Rally, formerly the National Front. You have probably heard of her. She is the leader of the main far-right party in France, anti-immigrant, anti-EU, welfare chauvinist, just terrible all around. Her father, who was... Oh, I just realized you probably actually can't see the flag behind me because of how my camera's there. Her father was very much further to the right than she is. She has moderated her party significantly and made it a much more significant force in French politics, but she is still very much a controversial and polarizing figure in French politics, and for justified reasons. Her party, after all, has fascist origins. Even if she's tried to purge it of its more extreme right elements, you cannot get good fruit from a poisonous tree. And her party is a poisonous tree, and she is poisonous herself. She is currently polling second, so this is why people think it's going to be a repeat of the 2017 election, where she also proceeded to the second round. And after that, she lost to Macron, whose whole pitch in that one was, you vote for me because I'm the only hope you have of stopping Le Pen. And so people voted for him to stop Le Pen. That campaign strategy won't work now because they've had Macron. And so they're saying, why did we bother voting for Macron to stop Le Pen? Le Pen is terrible, but Macron hasn't been much better. And that brings us to, of course, the incumbent himself, Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France, leader of La République En Marche. And this guy won the 2017 election. He ran as a centrist, pulling support from both the Republicans and the PS and parties around them, and has gotten a lot of other centrist parties to back him. Yet he's very much governed to the right. And this is the main thing about him. He is a staunch neoliberal. He's a staunch pro-European, but he's also a staunch presidentialist. He very much supports strong powers for the presidency, e.g. himself. And so he is governed in, according to some in France, an almost authoritarian manner. And his policies have been very unpopular with the French working class, especially his economic policies, increases on gas taxes, attempts to gut union rights, and a major pension reform. Most of these were blocked because of mass mobilizations by trade unions and, of course, the Yellow Vest movement. But he has still instituted a lot of very strong neoliberal policies, and even tried to turn to the right on immigration issues and multiculturalism by attacking Muslim organizations in France as well. So that's where he is at in terms of French politics. He has been another right-wing president for France in a country that's had a long history of right-wing presidents. I would personally argue that he's less of a Gaullist and more of a Bonapartist, and that he has actually once floated the idea that perhaps France needs a monarchy again. So that should tell you something about him. So, yeah, I am very much not a fan of him. His whole pitch in 2017 was, vote for me if you want to stop Le Pen. How has that worked out? Well, they voted for him to stop Le Pen, but they didn't get anything for it. French people feel now they've been betrayed, and this is why we have a large number of people who just aren't going to vote at all. And that's why the left, because it's so divided, has really struggled to counter both Macron and Le Pen. But Macron also has established a dominance over the French political system. He has consolidated his power more than any French president since Charles de Gaulle, by far, and so that makes him one of the most powerful presidents in French history. And this is a very concerning thing to me and to many others. And so he has very much used this to his advantage in the election, to the point that he refused to have election debates, to participate in debates with the other candidates. He refused to, which is tradition in France, and didn't even jump into the race until he already had the nominations to get on the ballot. He wasn't even a formal candidate yet. So that should kind of tell you the person he is. He is I would say he's almost like a liberal Trump in terms of his ego and self-righteousness. And I won't say he's as bad as Le Pen, because obviously fascism is the worst thing ever, but he is very bad. And I hope that he loses to a left candidate, specifically Mélenchon. Now, the race itself has been quite interesting. I'm going to get back to my main screen here. It started off thinking that Macron was just going to run away with this thing. He's a runaway freight train. None of the other candidates were really even getting close to him. You had Pécresse, Zemmour, Mélenchon, and Le Pen all climbing on top of each other to get into second place. But now the tables have turned significantly. While Macron still leads by a decent margin, he still has a few points over Le Pen. Le Pen is now firmly in second place, with Mélenchon closing in quickly behind her, and the election is tomorrow. And Mélenchon has historically shown a tendency to do a bit better in polls, or a bit better at the election than in polls as projected, at least when it's him in particular on the ballot. So hopefully that we'll see. I'm going to go to the chat now and see what people have been saying. This person is being spamming. And also I'm going to get a mod going here. So, Eplorbus, I've just made you a mod. But looking at the chats here, so what have people been saying? I'm not ripping you off, E Pluribus. I was doing this before you were. Left brain / right brain, anti-nuclear leftists are so dumb, especially in France. Well, I'm personally going to admit, I am in favor of nuclear energy, but I understand where people who are anti-nuclear energy come from. And in the context of France, it does make it a fairly unique stance for Roussel to be anti-nuclear energy. So that's why Roussel is so unique in that sense. And he's very much running as almost the rightist leftist, a law and order leftist is what I called him. So that's his whole shtick. And I understand where the French are coming from. And you bring up look at what happened in Germany. They got rid of nuclear and they ramped up gas. Yeah, that is an issue when you have right-wingers in charge of doing that. I think if it was Mélenchon or if it was even Jadot in charge of transitioning away from nuclear energy, they would definitely be putting their emphasis on renewable alternatives and not on gas for obvious reasons. One more thing. France was an oddity in the 1980s as they had socialists in charge while the rest of the West was heading towards conservatism and neoliberalism. To an extent, they did elect Mitterrand in the 80s, but he towards halfway through his first term shifted to the center and started embracing the third way even before Blair and Clinton did, mainly to pursue greater European integration. Ironically, though, most of his attempts at earlier leftist policies have been axed by the predecessors of the European Union, the European Commission, the European Community. So that was a very weird thing. Moving on. Zemmour does kind of look like Gargamel. I'm not, I don't know much about the Smurfs, but he kind of does. And he got destroyed. Okay, so left brain / right brain. Yes, thank you for bringing this up. I needed to talk about this. Of course, in the midst of all this, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has taken place, and this has been a major touchstone and major focus of the election race. A couple candidates, in particular Hidalgo and Jadot, tried to use this to boost their numbers because they have historically been a bit, as that section of the European left is, the pro-European left, is very hostile towards Russia. Both their parties are either, if not Atlanticist, they're continentalists who want to create an alternative to NATO within Europe through creating a European army, as Jadot wants to do. And so they immediately use that to attack Mélenchon, whose policy is he opposes both a European army and NATO. He wants France to become a non-aligned neutral nation. So that was a big issue for it. And they tried to use that to attack Mélenchon, but Mélenchon really wasn't impacted by it at all because what he was saying is he was immediately condemning Russia as imperialist because they are being imperialist. You can listen to my podcast on that. And so it just the attacks on him bounced right off. However, who it has really hurt has been the far right. In particular, it's hurt Le Pen and Zemmour. Even though Le Pen has increased her poll standings, it has hurt her to an extent that many are less comfortable voting for her, and so it's gotten some segments of the French right to consider just staying home altogether. And it's hurt Zemmour the most because he's not even welcoming refugees from Ukraine. So he is very unpopular as a result of that policy. He has said that he would support more aid to Poland to help the refugees, but the people of France are very clear, no, we actually want to bring in Ukrainian refugees, which I will note is a quite different tack than they had in the last election where they were very hostile towards Syrian refugees, where Mélenchon very clearly took a hard line towards Le Pen on that question, given Mélenchon himself was actually born in North Africa. Ironically, so was Zemmour. Hello, Osbers Gaming. Welcome to the stream. So, and then the last comment here that I'm seeing, what the last election did for the French right, this one will do for the left. That is possible. This one definitely will see a major shift for the left because I think after this one, there is going to be a big transition away from this divided stance of the French left because they realized they were this close to being in the second round, but they were not as successful because they were so divided. Roussel went his own way. He explicitly broke with Mélenchon to have his own candidacy. Hidalgo and Jadot could have formed a unity candidacy of their own, but they didn't, and so they were divided as well. The ecologists and the socialist polls were divided, and then Mélenchon kind of picked up the slack, in part because Mélenchon's whole strategy, and this has been the interesting thing, although he's the candidate of the La France Insoumise, is his party. He's running under the banner of l'Union Populaire, the Popular Union, which is meant to bring together people from outside of his own party and his own movement to unite them behind a common agenda, that being the Sixth Republic, creating that Sixth Republic that he so desperately wants. And he's garnered support from multiple members, high-profile members of the PS, the Ecologists, and the parties allied with them, like Generations. But perhaps most significantly is one of the earlier candidates who had backed, one of the earlier candidates in the election who was unable to get on the ballot, Christine Toibra. I think I'm saying her name right. I've actually met her, and I'm saying her name wrong. I feel really guilty about that, and my apologies to her. She, earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, came out and said, vote for Mélenchon. She is a pro-European, and she is saying vote for Mélenchon because her own candidacy failed. And now that is a big impact there. She was meant to be a unity candidacy for the left who could unite supporters of Mélenchon, Hidalgo, Jadot, Roussel, all together behind a singular candidacy for the left. It was actually called the popular primary to get her on, although all the other left candidates condemned it. When she won that and then tried to get on the ballot, but then failed. And now she is backing Mélenchon and saying you have to vote for him to get the left to the next stage and to beat both Macron and Le Pen. And even if we don't beat Macron, it will make the left into the stronger position that we can actually succeed in the National Assembly election so we can block his policies at the next one. And this is a little awkward for Mélenchon. Historically, he's strongly condemned strategic voting like this. He called it, he said it's choosing the lesser of two evils, and all that stuff that many of us like to say about strategic voting. I myself have said it many a time. But he is now saying he is not for strategic voting, he's for effective voting. Don't vote for someone who's going to be ineffective if you have a good option. So that's been the unique situation that he has found himself in now. He is now the strongest candidate for the French left. Some people are already voting in the overseas territories, in the French overseas territories. France itself, where most votes will be cast, will be casting its votes tomorrow. And it is going to be a big shocker to see. So, other things. Mélenchon will finally become the whole French left. The PS will die. So, that was actually something a lot of people had predicted after the last one. And his party definitely became the most prominent, viewed as the most prominent opposition party towards Macron, and one of the most significant forces of the French left. However, the PS, and the PCF for that matter, have a very entrenched constituency, even in the other elections. Even if they're not going to turn on Macron in the, or turn on their own parties in the presidential election, if they'll vote for Mélenchon in the presidential election, that is not a guarantee that they will vote for his party, for La France Insoumise, or candidates backed by La France Insoumise in the assembly elections, which is just as important, because, and that's kind of an interesting thing about the French Assembly, they work kind of in the same way, and so, as the presidential elections, you have a two-round system, whoever doesn't get more than 0.5% of the vote in the first round moves on to the second round, and often this very heavily disadvantages the French left, but it also makes it very hard for anyone who isn't the winner in the presidential election to win the assembly election. Historically, since they matched up the terms for the presidency and the assembly, previously they had a midterm system, and this led to something called cohabitation quite often, in which you would have a president from one party and then a prime minister from another faction. And this happened during the government of, during Mitterrand's government, and also during, I think, Chirac's government. I think it's Chirac. It might have been before that. You had a couple cohabitation governments during that time. But because of the now matched up terms, the assembly elections will be taking place in in May, after the presidential second round. That means, whoever wins the presidency, people are just going to back whoever was on the side of the president that won. That's generally what happens now. When Hollande won the 2012 French presidential election, the PS immediately after had a success in the National Assembly election. When Macron won in the 2017 presidential election, La République En Marche won the next assembly election. It follows usually, even though Mélenchon tried to say, vote for me, I'll be prime minister, and that's how we'll usher in the Sixth Republic. It didn't work out. People were like, we would have voted for you in the main show if we wanted that. Now we're going to focus on, the guy who's already in charge, so, whatever. Even though his party was quite successful in that election, it didn't work out as well. And the PCF, they still have a very significant core voter base that will vote for the party even if they don't like the presidential candidate. So that's the challenge. But I think what it is going to do is it's going to cause the major parties of the French left to start to align more around some of Mélenchon's ideas. I think they're going to take this idea of the popular union and they're going to run with it. I don't think Mélenchon is going to run again. I believe he's the oldest candidate in the race. He's over 70 years old. So he's not going to run for another election in 5 years. He's not going to run when he's 75. I'm fairly certain of that. But I think they are going to take up some of the main points of his crusade. In particular, I think they're going to take up this idea of the Sixth Republic. I think they're going to really take that on. It's insane how the PS went from 279 seats in the National Assembly to 30. Yeah, it has been quite significant. And also look at their European election results. They are, decimated to, I believe, the single digits of the last European elections. The traditional parties of the French left, and the French right for that matter, have really suffered as these new parties are taking over. La République en Marche, La France Insoumise, and, to an extent, the National Rally, although they're a much older party, they're now really, taking up a greater share of the French electorate in the French political system. This is why in my first video on it, I said that France stands at a political crossroads and a point of transition. The old political dominance is gone. Now they're trying to figure out who's going to be the new dominant forces in French politics, yet no one really has emerged except for La République en Marche, and they hold all the power. So that's been a big issue in French politics, and it's going to continue to be an issue going forward, and I think that makes the Sixth Republic an essential necessity. Will the PS go to single digits after this election? I think it is very possible. I think one thing, the PS nearly didn't run a candidate at all. Hidalgo was kind of the last-ditch candidate. There was only one other guy who put his name forward to be a candidate for the French presidency, and they had a primary. Not many people voted in it. Hidalgo won, and her campaign just never took off. So, they are wasting a ton of money on it. After the last election, they actually had to sell their headquarters they had occupied for decades because they were so broke. They barely had enough money for the European elections or the National Assembly elections, and they may be on the verge of total bankruptcy after this election as well. So, is there any possibility that Mélenchon will broker a deal with Macron? I'm a little confused what you mean. Do you think Mélenchon will broker a deal where, where Macron will promise to make Mélenchon prime minister? No, that's not going to happen. Do I think that there will be a deal to vote for Macron if Mélenchon doesn't make it to the second round? Also, no. Mélenchon has never endorsed a candidate in the second round. He usually says don't vote for one of the candidate. In 2012, he said don't vote for Sarkozy, the right-wing candidate against Hollande, but he never endorsed Hollande. He said don't vote for Le Pen in 2017, but he never endorsed Macron. So that's what he's going to say. He's going to say just don't vote for Le Pen, in all likelihood. But he's not going to give any support to Macron. And also, it's worth noting that Mélenchon's party is viewed by most in France as the main opposition force, as the party that is the most opposed to Mélenchon's government. So this would be this would be like if Bernie Sanders chose Marjorie Taylor Greene as his running mate, is the kind of scenario you're talking about there. That's how far apart these two parties are. Now there is also some people saying that maybe Le Pen will try and make a deal with Mélenchon. This also is the exact same analogy as I gave. That's Bernie Sanders and Marjorie Taylor Greene making a deal. It ain't gonna happen. And the reason Le Pen is saying that is she's saying she would not be open to nominating a leftist prime minister is in order to get left-wingers to vote for her. But it's not working from all the looks of it. If anything, it's actually making people more desperate to get Mélenchon to the second round to make sure that Le Pen can't nominate a prime minister. Because if it's a race between Mélenchon and Macron in the second round, then Le Pen's out. And in a second round with Mélenchon, I could actually see Le Pen, oddly enough, backing Mélenchon. But I would also see Mélenchon saying to Le Pen, go, whatever the French swear word equivalent of what word I'm using for is, yourself. He would not be receptive to working with Le Pen ever. In fact, the two have directly competed for seats in the National Assembly before. Even though the media sometimes likes to make the two seem like they're somehow similar, they really are not. But that's the main thing with this. They are very much polar opposites. The only thing they have in common is Euroscepticism, and people say, oh, well, they're both similar because they want to undo neoliberal reforms and stuff, but I'm just trying to think, the only similarity between the two is Le Pen doesn't like a lot of things like the trade union law that was passed under Hollande, and she does support the welfare state, but she's a welfare chauvinist. And that's very much a difference from Mélenchon, who is, an anti-neoliberal, democratic socialist, eco-socialist. He strongly supports the welfare state and wants to massively expand it to everyone, including immigrants. And Mélenchon has also praised what he's called the creolization of French society, which, if you don't know what creolization is, it's basically a French term for multiculturalism. And Le Pen is very much opposed to this, as is Macron, I might add. There is a lot of hostility towards multiculturalism in France, but Mélenchon has kind of embraced it to an extent, and that's why he's getting a lot of support from immigrants and people in the overseas territories as well. Mélenchon's going to pull his voters to let people know where they are going, like in 2017. Well, he did pull his voters to show people where his supporters were going, but he never endorsed anyone in the second round, and I don't think he's going to do the same this year. I'm just getting an alert here. Oh, wow. Okay, so here's an alert that is interesting. Ségolène Royal, who was the French presidential candidate for the Socialists in 2007, I believe. 2007. Actually was the ex-wife of François Hollande before Hollande dumped her for his first mistress, before dumping that first lady for a second mistress while he was in the Élysée, which is kind of funny. But she has just come out in favor of voting for Mélenchon. And that's a mind blower, because Ségolène Royal voted for Macron in both rounds of 2017. She is very much on the opposite end of the French left from Mélenchon. She's very much of the liberal center left that is very moderate and was the kind of people that were more aligned towards Macron back in 2017 in the first place. That's why she endorsed him, and she was actually appointed to some posts that by Macron during his presidency. But now she's saying vote for Mélenchon, which that's very, very surprising. But of course, it's all going to come down to what happens tomorrow. I will say there were a few things in this election that I expected to go a bit differently. I expected the COVID pandemic to actually play a bit of a bigger role in it and the economic fallout of it, but it seems to have been mostly focused on the political reform question, and on Ukraine is a big focus of the election, of course, as well. And the fact is, and that's been a quite interesting development, which is what I said, lol. He will basically give a non-endorsement of Le Pen and silent on Macron. Okay, yes, a non-endorsement against Le Pen. Okay, yeah. Which, yeah, I can see why what he's saying there. But if Mélenchon doesn't get to the second round, he is likely to not endorse anybody, and he's going to immediately focus his efforts on trying to win the National Assembly in May. I'm actually going to go and show the latest polling on this, if I can get to the right page. This is on the French Wikipedia page. Let me shift my screen over here. It's loading. Okay, so here is the current poll standings. So Artaud and Poitou, they are only 1.5% between them. Roussel is at 3%, and Hidalgo is at 2%, Jadot is at 5%. So collectively, they only have 10% of the vote. Mélenchon is getting between 17.5 and 18%, just a little less than he got in the 2017 elections. And of course, today, all polls are silent. You cannot poll after yesterday because that could bias the results. Now, Macron obviously is far and away in the lead. He's got a 10-point lead on Mélenchon, and Le Pen has a 5-point lead on him. But with this wave of recent endorsements, with things getting down to the wire, it may be a big turn for Mélenchon. It's gonna be tough. Most forecasts are not saying good things for Mélenchon, and he has only about a 5% chance of making it to the second round, and a similar percent chance of winning, because you have to get to the second round to win, of course. But that is a lot more than he had in the last election, and he's almost guaranteed to come in third unless he gets incredibly lucky and comes in second. And I hope he does. So yeah, someone just messaged me about something that, yeah, like it's gonna be incredibly strange if he does. But this is very interesting to see how so many of the other parties, especially of the left, have utterly failed in the wake of Mélenchon. Now, if Roussel, Hidalgo, and Jadot had all dropped out a couple weeks ago, Mélenchon would be in first place right now. He would have 27, 28% of the vote. But he doesn't. And this is why the divided left is a very big problem. However, it was going to be hard to see a united left to begin with. There are some really just intense divisions on the French left over these fundamental questions, whether it be Europe, whether it be immigration, the Sixth Republic, ecology. There are just a lot of big divisions on the left. Multiculturalism is also a big division on the left. As I've said, you have, like you had Jadot of the Ecologist, very much a Europeanist, very hawkish on Russia, who accused Mélenchon of being pro-Russia, and he has repeatedly made that accusation well before this election, I might add, who is hostile towards this Euroscepticism as well, has said nothing about the need for a Sixth Republic. You have Hidalgo, who is kind of representing the dying old guard of the French left that embraced liberalism, almost explicitly, in particular cultural liberalism, even if they were moving away from an economic liberal framework. And then you had Roussel, who was kind of moving towards a more old left orthodox position that was like I've called it, a law and order leftist stance, and who's pro-nuclear and pro-stake has been his positions that have set him apart from the rest of the left. And then, of course, Mélenchon is taking a line that's hostile to Europe, NATO, and Russia, and taking he's been accused of nationalism at several points. I personally wouldn't say that describes him very well, but he has taken very strong left stances on all the other issues and explicitly rejects liberalism. He is open, he supports multiculturalism and creolization of French society. He's big on environmental issues. He has probably one of the strongest platforms of any party in Europe, if not the world, on environmental questions. But he's not going to get the ecologists entirely behind him, although he has gotten some major figures within them behind him because of his stances on Europe and his stances on Russia, which are, not as explicitly opposed to Russia and not as hawkish on Russia as the center left is, or the ecologists are. And he's not going to take the more conservative stances that the PCF has opted to take. So it's a big division in the French left that we're seeing right now. And this I don't see changing until after this election. I think after this election, it will be a come-to-Jesus moment for the French left. They realize Mélenchon, at least his personality, has led the way. We need to embrace at least some of his ideas and get him behind us and us behind him in order to move forward to take out both Macron and Le Pen. If not in this election, at least in the assembly elections, in the European elections, and when they come to the polls the next time in 2027. That's the situation the French left finds itself in, and I don't see a very positive outcome to this election. I think Macron is going to win his second term, unfortunately, but this does show you that there is movement on the French left, and they can win if they unite, and if they unite behind someone like Mélenchon. For all his faults, Mélenchon has plenty of faults, don't get me wrong, they need to rally behind their best bet, and they cannot continue this atomization. Can I show the Ségolène Royal endorsement? I can see if it was just a news alert that's passed now. I'll see if I can find it. But let's see. Ségolène Royal, the useful vote on the left is Mélenchon, from France 24. So yeah, she is voicing her support for Mélenchon, which is surprising. She She and Mélenchon are not exactly friends. They were rivals back when Mélenchon was in the PS. So PS and Greens would be 50-50 on Macron, on Mélenchon Macron. That is possible. I think they would be more inclined to go for Mélenchon in that case, though, mainly because Mélenchon is more willing to work with them, at least when it comes down to brass tacks, even if he has a reputation of being a very divisive and demagogic figure on the left, and he's been accused of waging a scorched earth strategy against other parties on the left before. But I think he is more likely to take on more support from the Greens and from the PS, with the exception of their centrist wings, in the next round of the election. The one caveat to that is there are some more moderate parties that are allied them, part of what are called the polls in French politics, that are in the Socialist poll or in the Ecologist poll. They'd probably go for Macron over Mélenchon because they're just explicitly centrist parties or liberal parties. But I think the parties themselves would definitely endorse Mélenchon in a second round with Mélenchon. And they would probably be saying, give us the prime minister if you win. If you win, we want the prime ministership, and we want these ministries, and we want these policies too. And if it was a second round, if it was a Le Pen-Mélenchon second round, I can only see the most explicitly right-wing parties endorsing, even the center right, endorsing Le Pen in that case, and I would see Macron's party endorsing no one. So, but that's obviously not where the cards are. It's going to be, in all likelihood, a Macron-Le Pen second round, but a Mélenchon-Macron second round is still a possibility, but it's going to be tight. So, yeah, that's all I've got. Seeing if there's any other comments on this. It's going to be an interesting thing. I might do another stream tomorrow to talk a bit more about it, but I am really sad I didn't get to make my French election series go on any longer. I'm really sad about that. I was hoping that it would have been a long-term thing that I would have done for the whole of 2021 and into 2022, but my life just got crazy. I have moved all the way across the country. I'm now living in Maine, and also to kind of emphasize the craziness of my life, at the end of February, I actually broke this arm. Had to have surgery on it and everything, so it's a lot better now. I can move it, but it's still quite stiff, and yeah, there it is. So yeah, that's been my life there, and so obviously making a long-term series would have been very difficult, and I was torn on whether I wanted to do a podcast or a impromptu stream on this, but I think I made the right call on doing a stream. So yeah, well, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. I think I'm going to call it quits for tonight, and I'll talk again tomorrow when the results start coming in, maybe, depending on how my schedule looks. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night. And if you are a French person watching this, vote for Mélenchon tomorrow. Thanks so much. Solidarity.